Hello and welcome to All Villa No Filler, a podcast all about Aston Villa, the world's greatest football team. Of course, as ever, please do remember to subscribe to the show, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. In fact, so Villa kept up their Champions League push with a 1-0 win against Fulham. Plus, Villa are FA Cup youth champions for the second time in 4 years. We'll get to all that in a moment. And we'll also serve up a tongue spanking spicy question. But first things first, Frankie, how have you been?
Reeling from the term tongue spanking, to be honest.
Well, you wrote it.
I wrote it, didn't I? Yeah. What was on my mind? Um, yeah, all good. Yeah, Friday night, it was a big Birmingham weekend for me. Friday night, I went to Chad Williams and Michael Huggins's charity fundraiser for Acorns Children's Hospice at the Aston Social. I was honoured to be asked to go by Chad and Michael. Joined. It was nice to meet for the first time Hannah and Justin from the UTV podcast, and of course meeting Paddy again from For the Love of Paul McGrath, and then meeting Chad himself for the first time. It was funny. I walked in and I saw Chad, and it was almost like I was meeting a celebrity because it was somebody I've seen on screen and spoken to so many times. To actually see him in real life was like, oh my god, it's you! You are real.
Yeah, yeah,
You are
yeah.
good friend of ours, Chad. A fantastic person, incredibly inspiring young man. And the same with Michael as well. Two really inspiring Aston Villa fans and two people who are such a massive credit to the Aston Villa world, and to be invited to that event and get to take part in it and meet the other guys as well who I'd not met before. It was just absolutely fantastic, and yeah, well done to them, and thank you so much to them for inviting me. And then the day after that, I went on to see the mighty Villa win against Fulham, George.
Very nice. Well, it sounds like a a very wholesome and positive weekend for you, Frankie. There's not many of them in your life, is there, Frankie? Wholesome
No,
and positive?
no,
No, I didn't
no.
think so.
It's been 99% non-wholesome and fully down.
But this week there's always an exception to the rule, Frankie, and lucky for you, this weekend was a good weekend for you. Okay, well let's talk about the game then. So obviously it finished Villa 1, Fulham nil. We do keep up that push for the Champions League spots, as I say. It's still going to be tricky. The teams around us are still picking up points themselves, but we can only look after what we're doing, and we did exactly that at home against Fulham. It was absolutely a must win. I think not only from our perspective of chasing that top five finish, but also trying to shut out Fulham from making gains on us. But now there is a healthy gap between us. How did you see the game, Frankie?
Yeah, I mean, it was great to be at Villa Park as always. One of the most amazing things about going is like doing this podcast. We enjoy doing it. We enjoy chatting, and you can see download numbers. You can see sometimes, subscriber numbers and all this kind of stuff on YouTube or whatever. And it's weird to get a sense of like the people actually are watching and listening to it when I go to Villa Park now, because people coming up and saying nice things. And two guys from Ireland, met Connor again, who I'd met before at the Aston Inn, and then Stephen over from Dublin, who I'd never met before, and had a nice long chat with him in the Trinity Road concourse. And then my cousins as well, Stephen and Michael Moran as well. I haven't seen them down at Villa for years, so it was great to see them as well. So yeah, just got to see lots of different people. It was a great vibe. But going into the game, like I think the Villa of old, you're sort of thinking when if they have a terrible result in at Wembley against the Crystal Palace, you don't trust Villa after that, do you? But this is Unai Emery's Aston Villa, and they always bounce back. They just always seem to have it in them to come back, and the pressure's on. We have to keep winning. We have to keep trying to go for the Champions League, and with all of that, Villa went and played Fulham and got the result. And I think one thing I sat right at pitch side. I was right by the dugout. So I was, giving Unai Emery some advice of what to do. And I was in the substitutes' ears, and I was telling Marcus Silva to shut up and all that. No, I wasn't. It was quite interesting, like looking at that perspective and getting that sort of pitch side view. And one of the things I really noticed up close was how frustrated opposition players get with John McGinn, because they can't deal with him. He's such an interesting puzzle of a player. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
And also seeing Emery when he goes berserk.
Yeah. Are we talking about the Conser incident here?
Conser incident. And I
Yeah.
myself was furious with Conser for allowing what happened to happen. It was like it was
Yeah.
just, I
I
say
don't,
it.
I, I don't speak Spanish, Frankie, but I feel like I could translate a couple of words that Emery said to Conser, which well we can't repeat on this podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah. And he'd have
Yeah.
certainly turned around and said it to me if he'd seen how I was gesturing. But yeah, it was and that's what Concert does do that. He does do that kind of composed to casual. That's the term I always use for Villa, that we sometimes go from composed to casual. And Concert's actually probably the best player example of it. And that was a good example of him doing that, him sort of looking for the foul and instead of just making a simple pass when you had two players on, really to pass it.
Mm,
Obviously, we love Concert, he's great, but that was a good example where I think Villa sometimes get a little bit too casual, and it could have cost us, but it didn't. So yeah, but look, I thought Fulham, if you think of Fulham as quite genteel and you think they're all just hanging around in a sort of nice Victorian building in, Putney in London and, going for tea and scones on the King's Road with Hugh Grant, very, very naughty, very naughty. But they were very naughty, actually, because they were doing a lot of fouls.
yeah.
They're very physical, very big side. Marcus Silva's got them coached. It's a little bit of a Mourinho-ish thing at times where every time it looked like Villa might just be finding a way through, they bring them down. And the way referees are this season, they let for players get away with it over and over again. Like look at Newcastle.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times does Bruno Guimaraes need to foul a player to get a booking this season? Yeah, Fulham were quite foully and niggly. It was quite difficult, but at the end of the game, if there was a long period of time where I wondered, Villa not taking that second chance, will we get punished for it like we were earlier this season?
Yeah.
But actually, at the end of the game, I sort of thought we should have won it really 3-0. And there wasn't really too much I can remember Fulham doing other than a decent-ish chance for the Welsh lad they've got. His
Well,
name's
Harry Wilson.
Harry Wilson, that was it. I was about
Yeah.
to call him Harry Winks. Harry Wilson, that was it. So yeah, other than that, there wasn't really a lot they offered. But Villa, I think we really should put 2 or 3 away. And I think that might actually be a good example of what maybe's not gone quite right this season. Early this season, we had lots of chances in games, didn't score as many as we should have done, and then we got hit, sucker punched with goals we conceded, and that's why we've probably had more draws than we should have done at home.
Yeah, well, I think
Um,
our goal difference attests to that, doesn't it, Frankie? There's
yeah,
certainly a lot of games where we've gone into and haven't scored the goals that you'd think we would or should have done, considering the chances created, and obviously at the back we've been a bit suspect. So
yeah.
that would attest to that.
But
Yeah,
if
I think
I was gonna say, like watching it in the stadium was quite interesting because I mean, what did you think watching it on TV? Was it a different perspective or?
no, no, no. I think it was the same. I didn't get any sort of different vibe from the match at all. I certainly felt as the game went on and we obviously were consolidating that 1-0 lead. You're getting nervous that there is going to be that moment. I thought that constant moment was going to be it. That was how Fulham were going to get their opportunities, catching us on the break, and yeah, as you say, they've got some very big, sort of imposing physical players. Sander Berge, is a big, strong kind of unit of a man, and
Lukic.
a canny, yeah, a canny Premier League operator now. Iwobi, Jimenez, they're big physical players, and I think when the lineup was announced, I think myself and a lot of Villa fans thought that perhaps Tyrone Mings would and should be in that starting 11 because of the physicality that Fulham possess, and Pau Torres, he's struggled a bit this season, and certainly didn't put his name in lights against Palace in the FA Cup semi-final. He's had his critics this season. I think that's fair to say, and a lot of it is down to his his lack of or perceived lack of physicality. But I thought he had a really really strong game against Fulham, and he showed a lot of his strengths. We know that his strengths include, passing, playing out from the back, and there were a lot of moments which did start with him on the ball, playing forward, trying to be positive, and that allowed us to sort of to get forward, particularly in the first half, and create some opportunities and some chances. But to be honest, as you say, I didn't really, aside from that chance where we lost the ball in midfield, I can't really think of too many opportunities that Fulham had. I thought we managed that game really well, and that was certainly a game where we were managing it. That was that was
Yeah.
that was Unai Emery, telling his players, 3/4 of the way through the second half to just to sit back, soak up a little bit of Fulham pressure, not to allow them to have too many opportunities, and they didn't. And so we were able to come away with the 1-0 win, and it was much needed. I mean, yes, it would have been nice to score a few more goals, maybe create a few more chances, particularly at home, against Villa Park, at Villa Park, where our record is just so good at home. I really do fancy us against anyone at Villa Park. You would perhaps want to see a few more goals scored, especially, with goal difference perhaps being as significant as it could be in the race for the top five. But yeah, to get a win, particularly after the result at Wembley, which felt so flat, I think arguably our worst performance of the season
It
so
was.
far. That one, I don't think we'll have a worse one now in the remaining games to come. But yeah, to come back and get that win was really really important. And obviously we've got three really really big games to come now, and we just have to, as you say, Frankie, just have to hope and pray that the teams above us start dropping points, start slipping up, and we have to take advantage where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I saw a few people mentioning the atmosphere. Now, like, on TV, I do often think the atmosphere comes off a bit quieter in all Premier League games. But then when I was in the stadium, I don't know whether it's just sitting in the lower Trinity where I was, the acoustics from the Holte End make it seem like there's a really good atmosphere. Because I always think back to the 90s and 2000s and how Villa Park was silent. Like, I swear on my life, I remember Villa Park just being absolutely just pin drop at times in,
Yeah.
in the 90s and 2000s. Every time I've been since about 2018, 19, I'm always thinking like the atmosphere is really good,
I
or
think
better.
Villa
Like,
Park's,
you know, I thought it,
yeah.
I thought it wasn't like Champions League night, but I thought it was decent. I thought like for an early kickoff, I
I
thought
think
there was a lot of noise
early
coming
early
from the whole end.
kickoff, the opposition, Fulham aren't going to exactly put bums on seats. Let's be honest. But it was a decent capacity crowd for an early kickoff, which was on TV against an opposition, as I say, which isn't sort of tier A competition. It didn't sound particularly bad to me
Yeah, I
when
thought it
I
was
was
all
when I
right.
was listening,
Just
and
interesting that so many people seem to say it was bad. I was like, well, I didn't think it was bad.
yeah, I mean, maybe there's a bit of fallout from the Palace result and being knocked out of the FA Cup. Perhaps maybe that was a factor in people perceiving that. But Villa Park is one of those stadiums where sometimes, depending on where you sit in the ground, your perception of the atmosphere changes, kind of where you are.
Yeah,
So maybe that has something to do with it too. But yeah, I mean, I think Villa Park's obviously one of those stadiums where if it's rocking and the crowd are with you, then you can literally. I mean, the ball is sucked into the net
yeah,
those nights. I mean, I remember going back a few years now, that game against Sunderland we saw, where for some random reason the atmosphere was really heightened in that game. I think because we were fighting relegation and Sunderland were kind of relegation
yeah,
rivals.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
honestly, every time the ball came anywhere near the box, it was going into the back of the net, and it
yeah.
was it was we were sat in the whole end, weren't we, Frankie? And it was the ball was being sucked in. It felt like, and that's the atmosphere that Villa Park can generate when it's going well. I think equally when it's not going so well, you can kind of hear the derision from the crowds.
Yeah, we're bad. We're bad for that. I
We
think
are, and actually,
generally
on,
a
on
lot of
on that
teams.
point, I don't know if you read, and sorry to spring this on you if you haven't, but Matty Cash was quoted
Yeah, I saw that.
one of the newspapers, the Telegraph, perhaps, being kind of slightly critical. It certainly appeared to be of
Mm.
of supporters, and saying how some negativity can feed onto the players, and how it sometimes feel that the fans are working against the players. Is that something that you can sort of
Um,
sympathise with, or was that sort of misplaced,
yeah,
those
I
comments?
I think it's something I've always felt at Villa. Where again, I'll go back to the 90s and 2000s. What used to happen a lot, and this was probably in the Trinity where I used to sit a lot, was I'd be sat around fans that would get very, very. It was like you were sort of wondering why they were there because from minute first 10 seconds, they're screaming at the players, telling everyone they're useless and all that. And that's the sort of side of fan. You can't gatekeep fans. People have a right to do what they want when they're paying. Well, within reason, to when they're paying. But uh, I just used to find that really, really frustrating. I really didn't like it at all. It was something that I used to think, why is this like this? And then the other day, like again, I was in where I was sat. There was one moment, and it was interesting because Matty Cash was the player involved. Where again, we was really close to pitch, and Cash. It was in the 93rd, 94th minute, and Cash is pushing forward, and a group sort of behind me who were absolutely just bawling at him for not doing like a suicidal one-on-one take on of Anthony Robinson, and then knocking it into the air. And I was like, we're 1-0 up. They're down to 10 men. Why would you think that he should take on that man? Because if he loses it, they're in behind. They get a chance they might score. And who are you all going to scream at for that? It's going to
Yeah.
be Matty Cash. And, the amount of times I hear, like, get rid, kick it. Like, and I'm like, it's like, what? Like, Unai Emery's just sat 10 meters there.
Yeah,
What are
you
we
kind of feel
doing?
like what have you been
But,
what have you been watching
but what?
for 3 years?
Yeah, but I mean, what I would say is like, like Cash, like I'm not quite sure where that came from because I think Villa fans generally been very positive in the big games
Yeah.
this season, and I don't know whether he's looking at social media, and social media is not something I think players should really pay too much attention to because it's not, you are just going to see some real toxicity on there, and it can't be good for anybody to be
Well,
reading that stuff.
I wonder whether that's more of a personal thing with Cash because I would say he's been a bit of a fall guy for
Yeah,
when we struggled, when we've had periods in the season where we struggled, because that right back spot throughout the season has not been until quite recently, until Cash has actually nailed that down.
yeah,
It's not been settled, has it at all? We started with Nedeljkovic, he goes out on loan, we get Garcia in, we've tried him for a little bit. God knows where he's gone now.
yeah.
And we've even tried playing Dina there in spell. Do you know what I mean? It's Conser's obviously played it right back. So it's been under serious rotation over the course of the season. And we've talked often on this podcast about Cash's limitations and in
Yeah.
terms of is he a bit of a weak spot in the 11? Arguably he probably is. But that's not to say he doesn't work hard and he does give his all. I think we have to credit him for what he's done for us.
Industrious is what I think.
He's
He's
he's industrious,
athletic
but
and industrious. Yeah.
absolutely, and I think actually the Fuller game was one of his best games this season. I would argue,
Oh, he's
and he's
played a
had a
key.
couple of really really good games this season. I
He's
think it's
played a key
unfair.
role in a team that's got to the Champions League. He's played a
Yeah,
key role in a team that's got gonna is in Europe again. We've qualified for Europe again. So, um, yeah, you gotta give him credit for that. Like he's yes, he's not like Roberto Carlos, but at the same time, he's not as bad as I think a lot of people sort of say. I think getting into that final third is where he's more limited, I think. But yeah, I think he's just an athletic, industrious player who does the job that's asked of him, really. I think he does it to a decent level. Yes,
Mhm.
we probably could get a world-class fullback or a better fullback, but at the same time, he's no, I do like Cash, and I think he's done a fantastic job with Villa in the time he's been with us. I'll always have affection for him for sure. Um, so yeah, but I think just yeah, like watching it up close and hearing that, I did think like these players are so focused on the game, I doubt they hear it, but sometimes they must pick up on it. So
Yeah,
maybe that was part of it, but at the same time, like watching it up close again, like I say, Joe, I see a lot of people saying Tielemans was man of the match. Obviously, you got the goal winner. Um, he had his moments of absolute brilliance as he always does because he's a fantastic midfielder. But for me, I actually thought man of the match was John McGinn. I thought
yeah.
John McGinn was absolutely brilliant.
Mhm.
In that first half when we were struggling to sort of pass it out the back at times, you just bypass that press, the long ball into John McGinn, and the Fulham players, Kenny Tete, simply did not know what to do with him. He backs in, and the strength he has, his ability on the ball, every good thing that happened in that first half went through him. And it happens over and over and over again that he holds it up, he lays it off, and something happens. Or he can win a foul, he can get Villa back up the pitch. McGinn is just, I think he's just one of those players that you can look at, and I think a lot of non-Villa fans would look at him and think, oh, he's just John McGinn. He's just a Scottish man with a big bum, right? He's not that great. He's a brilliant football player. He's
Yeah.
got everything: attitude, ability. I better not repeat that he's an Alex Ferguson Man United player because I've said it a million times. I've said it a million times. There's probably a drinking
It's
game on
like,
this
yeah,
podcast. If
I
I
was just,
say that, people do
I was
it.
just going to say,
Or
no, but you're right, and I think he's had a really strong end to the season as well. I think particularly the last few games, he's really come into his own and really helped the team and been a really important part of that starting 11 as well.
yeah,
Because there's serious competition for places now in the middle of the park. We've got some genuinely fantastic, top class, world class players in there. If you talk about Kamara and Tielemans in particular, they could genuinely walk into any one of the clubs currently sitting in the top four. So,
mm,
he's got a lot of competition to play there. But I think I think for me, he still is one of the first names on the team sheet, and he's really proven himself. And against Fulham, no exception. He's more than just kind of, as you say, kind of a Scottish kind of as you perceive a sort of a Scottish midfielder to be, the sort of industrious kind of hard
Hard work,
worker.
yeah,
He is that, but he's also so much more. And
yeah, he is, he is.
we're obviously very, very lucky to have him. I'm very much part of the John McGinn fan club. Right, shall we move on? Because we've had a
Well,
very, very important victory.
yes.
No, we didn't win the FA Cup this season, Frankie.
No.
Yes, we have won the FA Youth Cup. Yes, we have won Best Podcast at the We Are Creative Awards. So that's two for the Villa this season. That's
Yeah,
okay. If we
yeah.
get Champions League football, then that will be. I think
When
that'll be a
when's
nice
our
way to
open
wrap
top
this up.
bus parade, George?
Well, I was expecting. Well, hopefully we'll get the call. Have you? Has your phone rung yet?
No.
Not
Imagine me
yet.
and you going
Okay.
around on like we go on a tourist bus and we're just driving around with it, like no one's
I'll saw a hole in my Ford Fiesta, and then you can sit in the back seat with the
people flicking V's at us, middle fingers.
throwing
Dickheads,
tomatoes
you
and
bunch of
rotten eggs.
dickheads. Rubbish.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they'll love us. They'll love us, Frankie. Shower us with
Yeah,
roses.
throwing tomatoes like in
Yeah.
medieval plays.
But yes, FA Youth Cup champions. I mean, that is a hell of an achievement again for the kids. That's twice in 4 years we've
Yeah,
picked up that
amazing.
trophy, of course. And yeah, it was a great performance. 3-1 against Man City. Now, Frankie, did you know this Man City, the youth team at Man City, they haven't lost in 25 consecutive games until they
Wow.
rocked up at Villa Park this afternoon. They haven't lost a game since November. Clearly, they are a team of some pedigree, very much like their senior squad. Emil Heskey's son played in the game
He's
today.
making it. He's gonna make it.
He's going to make it,
Yeah,
isn't he? He'll be
quality,
wearing the claret
quality
and blue in
player.
no time, just like his dear old dad. But yeah, I was just thinking actually about that 2021 squad, and we were speaking before today's show about where that team is now. That was 2021. So you had the likes of Kane, Kessler, Hayden, who has had a very, very good season at Preston. I mean, the team itself was sort of battling relegation in the Championship, but they managed to stay up. He has been a shining light for them this season. Still on Villa's books, of course. He was only there on loan, so it'll be very interesting. We talk about the right back position, obviously. Um, where will he fit in next year? Could it be at Villa? If not, you'd expect a sizable fee for how well he performed in the Championship, and given his age, he's still such a young player. But in that team we also had Bogard, who's been in and around the first team for us this season, and obviously
Yep.
clearly has a has
Yep.
a big future. Caden Young, who has been loaned out to Royal Antwerp in Belgium, in,
Yep.
in that the top league in Belgium. So again, you like to think that he's got a big future. Louis Barry, of course, who did so well with Stockport this
Yep.
season, has gone on to play in the Championship on loan at Hull, and Carney Chukwuemeka, who was the star of that team, who we all thought would be a kind of a Villa legend in the making. Didn't quite work out that way.
Yeah.
Went to Chelsea, didn't play that many games, went on loan to another massive club in Borussia Dortmund this season. So, there is, if you're looking at it as a player playing in today's game, that 3-1 win against Man City, you're looking at players from even a few years ago and seeing, some of them are playing for Villa, some of them are playing for high level clubs somewhere else. Some of them are, they are playing games of football at a very, very good level.
Yeah.
So it does all go well for, this generation for going forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the best things Perslow ever did. I mean, I'm not like Perslow's biggest fan, but I think the focus on the youth team when he came in, hiring Dean Smith and the focus on the youth team were two absolutely brilliant decisions. I don't know if it was fully him that did the youth team thing, but he was there when it happened. I feel like I remember it was. And that investment has just proven to be absolutely phenomenal for Villa. And, our youth team, our women's team, the first team, Unai Emery, the sort of marketing of Villa, it all feels like everything it's sort of elite club. Like it looks like an elite club now. We act more like an elite club. Still ways to go, of course, but to see the youth team win the FA Youth Cup twice in 4 years,
Yeah.
that is really quite extraordinary.
It is. Well, I
Uh,
think Villa have won it 5 times in our history. I think the
yeah,
competition started back in the 50s or 60s,
yeah,
and two of those 5 times have been in the last 4 years. So,
yeah,
we're getting things right at the moment, and kind of going back to my point as well in terms of where we are and our sort of our strategy, our policy as a club. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the financial situation, FFP. and let's be frank, one of the best ways of generating income is
The youth
essentially
team.
selling off talented young players.
Yeah.
And there clearly is a pathway for some of these players. Tristan Rowe, he was on the bench against Cardiff. He played today. Bradley Burrows was in the squad against West Ham. Earlier in the competition,
Yeah.
and it was
Jimo Aloba.
Jumo Aloba, who's been in and around the first team squad for a few games. He made his debut against Wickham in the League Cup.
Hmm.
So he's actually played in the first
And
team as
and
well.
Ben Brogio wasn't available, and he's another
Very
big, big,
talented player. He's obviously played. He played in that game against Wickham too.
brilliant,
So
big
you know,
talented player.
it's a really exciting. We've had a couple of generations, a couple of years of really exciting players in our youth team, and they're winning things. It would be great if the first team could do it,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's really exciting to see that we've got these kids to play, and what better way to invest than in the youth team? Because as I
Mm.
said, not only from a financial perspective, if these kids go on loan, have a successful spell somewhere, that club wants to buy them. If they have good loans, then they're going to be paying a premium for them, or other clubs are going to be paying a premium for them. Or, which a lot of us do want, they come into the first team setup like
Yeah.
Lamar Bogard, and they start coming into the squad, and the fans have a real affinity with those players. It's win-win.
Mm.
So it's an absolute, it's the right pathway, it's the right structure, and long may that continue.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's like we there were a lot of I watched the final today, and there were a number of them I watched, and I thought this is a really, really talented group. Now, look, I mean, there's going to be everybody screaming the thing that is obvious. Most youth players don't make it, right? That's fine. Fine, that is just the way it is. But if you look, as you mentioned earlier, George, if you look around in football now, there are a lot of teams that have players that have come through Villa's academy, and you look at Manchester City, and you think of like the elite players they've been producing now for a long time. The number of players that have been going around, like it was James Trafford was at City, I think, Liam Delap, Morgan Rogers, Jadon Sancho. The list just goes on and on
Yeah.
and on and on. And that's what hopefully Villa will be. I mean, look, not all these players are going to stay at Villa, and some of them will probably cynically have to be sold for PSR reasons. It's the way it is. But one or two of them might actually be somebody that Unai Emery looks at and goes, I want them in the first team. And yeah, I mean, honestly, looking at this group again, I thought there's a lot of players here who, whether they make it to the Premier League or not, are going to make it in football because
Mhm.
there's a lot of real talent out there. That was a really talented team.
Yeah.
It was great to watch. A brilliant goal from Jimo Aloba and from Cole Brannigan as well. Two fantastic
Hell of a goal
finishes.
that. Yeah. Really,
Um,
really good. And in front of a crowd of more than
yeah,
25,000 people, for
fantastic. Aston Villa have just brilliant fans, don't we?
yeah. I mean,
Everybody turning up and
if
loving it. Great
yeah,
stuff.
I mean, if you want any indicator of just how big we are as a club, look no further than 25,000 people turning up
Yeah,
to watch the under-18s in a Youth Cup final, which was really good. And a big shout out as well to Jimmy Shan. He's the coach of
yeah,
the under-18s. He's a coach of real pedigree. He's been manager of Solihull Moors. He was assistant. He was caretaker of West Brom in that infamous playoff semi-final we had with them a few years back. He was in charge at that point in time. He's been assistant manager at Rochdale. He's been at Huddersfield as a coach. He's been at Swindon. He's been around the block, and he's very well respected. And he's obviously done a cracking job with the kids. And yeah, as you say, Frankie, hopefully we'll see a few of them make names for themselves.
yeah. And Jimo Aloba, like I slightly got Carney vibes off him, Carney Chukwuemeka. I remember when I
Yeah.
watched Chukwuemeka in that final a few years ago and thought he looked like somebody who'd stepped down from the men's team to play with the younger teams. Jimo Aloba looked a little like that. He had the sort of technique, physicality, intelligence, all of that.
Mhm.
So hopefully, I'll be excited to see more of him in the summer. I'm sure he'll train with Villa and maybe get a big loan next season as well.
Yeah, he
Um,
certainly seems like the star in that team, doesn't he? So yeah, one to keep an eye on.
yeah, and we should also just send our regards to the family of Peter McParland.
Yeah, well, from stars of today, of the future to stars of yesterday, Peter McParland, what an absolute icon in Aston Villa's history. The last living member of that 1957 team that obviously lifted the last time we lifted the FA Cup, scoring twice in that final against The Busby Babes, that Man United team, who obviously a year later would be decimated by the Munich air crash. I mean, such an iconic time in English football history, that era,
Mm.
and McPartland was right at the heart of it for Aston
Yeah.
Villa, scoring goals in that final. I think he only had his 91st birthday a few weeks ago. This season, he's been at Villa Park. He's been doing actually bits and pieces with the media team. I've seen. He's been there. He was there at the ground for the West Ham game. Do you remember the West Ham game? He was
Um,
in the FA Cup.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was. They brought a few other former Villa players, and Peter was there at the ground for that one back in was it February, or certainly earlier this year. And Yeah, he's really up there with one of the most iconic players to ever wear the sort of famous claret and blues.
Oh,
So
definitely. Definitely.
condolences to his family, and hopefully his legacy will live on in sort of future games. Future players can look up to him as a real icon of the team.
Things are about to get hot and heavy here at All Villa HQ in this, the spicy question. Georgios, will Ollie Watkins still be the Aston Villa number 9 next season? Although
Oh,
technically he's not the
Frankie.
number 9, but he is our number 9, isn't
I know what you mean.
he?
Yeah, in playing terms,
Yeah.
our main striker.
Yeah.
That's a spicy one, Frankie. That really is. Yeah. Um, and you've gone straight in there. There was no real build up. You just hit me with it.
Yeah.
Remember
A punch out of nowhere.
yeah, it's like the ice bucket challenge. You just poured that cold bucket of water over my head with that one,
Well, it
Frankie.
was so
But
spicy and hot. I had to
instead
calm
of
pull you
cold
down.
water, it was actually, curry sauce or something. Um, the
Just
curry
rolling
sauce,
around and out holding your eyes. Ah, help
the
me.
curry sauce challenge. Um, I am not convinced. I'll be honest, Frankie. I'm not convinced. I actually think that it'll be a big summer filler. The more um, we've come to the end of this season, the more I feel there might be more significant changes to the squad.
Hmm.
Um, I think once again, now Emery's obviously been in charge for about 3 seasons now. I think we'll probably start to see more of a phase out of the players he hasn't signed, who have obviously served us incredibly well.
Mhm.
Um, you do wonder. There's been a lot of rumors recently about the future of Emilio Martinez. Like that seems crazy, doesn't it? In many ways, to think that potentially that could be on the cards, but it could be on the cards. And we've mentioned many times before, Frankie, that there is no player that's kind of not for sale if a club is willing to offer an
Right
amount
money.
that we deem to be reasonable. Again, in this day and age of PSR and trying to turn profits where you can, you have to look at it as a club. But speaking about Ollie Watkins, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like I've kind of got I've got a bit of the vibe this season that maybe that relationship is sort of naturally coming to a bit of an end. I don't know if you kind of maybe agree with that.
Hmm.
But he certainly hasn't been as prolific as he was last season. It's incredibly difficult to reach those levels anyway. I don't want to be too critical of him in that regard. He has contributed massively this season. Um, but I just feel like it sort of feels like the closing of a chapter that we're sort of coming to that natural end of a
Yeah.
player being with a club. He's been here for a number of seasons now, been an absolutely fantastic player for us. But I wonder whether, we are coming to that end of the line.
Yeah, it reminds me very much of when I was at university in like 2007, and I was watching an Arsenal game with Thierry Henry, and sorry, I wasn't watching it with Thierry Henry. Thierry Henry was in the game. I
That's
was
a hell of
watching it
an
with an
anecdote.
Arsenal fan, and but I remember it was sort of in a weird year with Henry, where it was a little. He still scored lots of goals, but it felt like he was not quite. Something was not quite right. I
Hmm.
remember saying to the Arsenal fan, like, "Do you feel like Henry's going to go this summer?" And he was like, "It just feels like it's coming to a natural end." And then he did go to Barcelona, and it slightly feels like exactly as you say, George. It's a little bit like that with Watkins. I'm not saying that I want Watkins to go. I
Yeah,
don't think
no.
either of us are saying that. I think we both love Ollie Watkins. He's been a fantastic player for Villa, and again this season, 15 Premier League goals, a whole load of assists again. His numbers are just absolutely brilliant for the last few years, and he's been one of the top goal scorers in all of in Europe, to be honest, in the last few years. Um, but yeah, I think is there a world in which I could imagine if Villa, he's 29 going on 30 now, if Villa got a big bid for him, they'd take it. Yeah, I could see that. What would Emery want that was different slightly? I think maybe you saw the best and more frustrating parts of Watkins' game against Fulham, where he's so industrious. He runs and he runs. He's physical. He drags players up a pitch. I guarantee you, there's not a defender in the Premier League who enjoys playing against Ollie Watkins. He does so much work that just goes unheralded. He runs everywhere. He drags players everywhere. He makes the right runs. He's physical and bustling, and when he gets deep and he can drag a team up the pitch, he's really good at it. He just does a lot of fantastic striker work. That's just the least appealing thing to do on the pitch, to be honest.
Yeah.
But and he gets the goals. But I do think there were two chances the other day. One he hit straight at Bernd Leno, which I think, in fairness, if it's actually a lot harder to score those.
Yeah, it was almost like
you need to get through the legs, which is what he tried to do.
Yeah, I think in many ways the hard work was the positioning and the timing of the run, which he absolutely nailed.
Yeah.
And the chance was one of those ones where it could have gone in, or it could have been a good save from Leno. I think you're right. If you're being harsh, you would say that perhaps he should have, you know, timed his shot better, or got the angle slightly better. But
he should have scored.
He'd done a lot of hard work.
The ball across from Cash is the one he should have scored. And I think you go back to the Arsenal game at the start of the season, and I'd say, does he miss more top chances than others? I mean, I don't know. Maybe if you look at Erling Haaland, if I watched him every week, I might think the same thing. But it does feel like he does, or he has done this season. But again, his numbers are excellent, so it's hard to be too critical. As I say, I love the man. If he stays, brilliant. But yeah, I think there's a world in which Villa could take the money, and I think were Villa to look for something different, it might imply that maybe we change up how we play. There's maybe a different profile that Emery will be looking for. And as you say, George, I think this summer it's hard to shake the feeling that there's not a lot of change coming. I just feel like there is things going to happen this summer. I think there's a good number of players going out and a good number probably coming in.
To me, it sort of feels like it's a squad that needs more like a freshening up.
It probably does.
So some of the players that have been there for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And they've been absolutely brilliant. And not for 1 second do I want to say it's time to move them all on. It's time to get rid of all, but it just feels, just to give us that, because I think what we've lacked a little bit this season is just this sort of energy, a bit of sort of like, that you do get from, say, a player that's walking through the door and is experiencing Villa Park and Aston Villa, playing for Aston Villa for the first time. It's that kind of like, that sort of spark that you get from a signing that's desperate to prove themselves at a new club. And I just think, there's been, as I said, a lot of players that have been there for years and years and years and have been fantastic servants, unbelievable servants. But that the kind of the natural cycle of a player with a club is just sort of, turning towards the end of its sort of life cycle. And it just needs a freshening up, perhaps.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how few of his own players Emery actually has when you really think about it. It's quite amazing that. I certainly think Maatsen and Onana towards the end of the season have looked closer to what we wanted, and that it really gives me hope for next season.
And I think Marlon will be a big player next season.
Yeah, he's certainly a very good. He's a very good squad player, Marlon, for sure. Versatile as well, physical, good finisher. But I think, it just feels like there's probably going to be a decent amount of change. Now, one summer I go back to is the 95 season, where on the first day of the season, I went to Villa Park and saw Villa beat Man United 3-1. Never win anything with kids match. And I remember in that game, there were a lot of new signings for Villa.
Yeah.
feel like Alan Wright and Mark Draper come to
Draper.
mind.
Yeah.
Maybe even Ian Taylor, though I might be getting the year wrong.
No, I think Taylor was before that.
Was he 94-ish or something? Yeah. Well, but there was a lot. It was a very different looking team to what I'd known from 92, 93, which had been a very successful team, and then 94 when it won the Coca-Cola Cup. So there comes a point where you do need to change a successful team, and it feels like we might be approaching that point. And that it presents challenges. Not every sign is going to work. There might be players that we should have held on to that we don't. But at the same time, like look at what happened in '95 and think that that refresh did actually give a little bit of extra impetus and gave us something else to go for. And I think that we might be looking at something quite similar this summer. It's exciting. It's exciting. Whatever happens, it's exciting. And if Ollie stays, brilliant. And if it's time for him, if he wants to go or whatever, then fine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I will always say I love Ollie, and if he stays at Villa forever, great. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I think as well. Just the last point to make is I think it has to be right as well for all parties. It's not just would be a move be right for Ollie. It has to be right for us. It has to be right for the buying club. It has to be right for certain parameters sort of have to be met before something like that does happen. I mean, maybe Ollie himself does feel like it might be the right time to move on. And if so, you look at it and think, he's been a fantastic, like an unbelievable servant to the club, and he would absolutely go with best wishes. But like you, Frankie, just to reiterate, I think he's an absolutely top player, and if we do keep him beyond the summer of this year, I will be absolutely delighted.